She started coming home late from the gym, smelling like someone else. I put a camera in her car. I expected a man. What I saw was way worse and far more personal. The changes started about 3 months ago. My wife had always been the type to work out maybe twice a week, just enough to stay in shape, but suddenly she was at the gym every single day after work. She'd leave the house in her regular clothes and come back in workout gear, hair wet from what I assumed was a shower at the gym. At first, I was actually happy about it. She seemed more energetic, more confident, and honestly, she looked amazing. But then the little things started adding up. She'd come home and immediately head straight to the shower without even saying hello. Her phone was always face down now, and she'd take it with her to the bathroom. When I tried to hug her when she got home, there was this scent that wasn't hers. It wasn't perfume exactly, but something clean and fresh that definitely wasn't her usual body wash or shampoo. It smelled expensive, like one of those high-end colognes you smell walking past department store counters. I started paying more attention to everything. Her gym bag was always perfectly organized now, which was weird because she used to just throw everything in there. Her workout clothes were always clean and folded, not sweaty and crumpled like they should be after an intense workout. When I asked her about her routine, she'd give these vague answers about cardio and weight training, but she couldn't tell me specifics when I asked follow-up questions. The worst part was how distant she'd become. We used to talk about everything, but now conversations felt forced and surface level. She'd scroll through her phone during dinner, claiming she was reading fitness articles or looking at workout videos. When I'd lean over to see, she'd tilt the screen away or quickly close whatever she was looking at. Our intimacy had basically disappeared too. She was always too tired or said she felt gross from working out, even though she'd supposedly already showered at the gym. I felt like I was going crazy. My friends would tell me I was being paranoid when I'd hint at my concerns. They'd say things like how great it was that she was taking care of herself and how I should be supportive. But I knew something was off. You don't live with someone for years and not notice when they become a completely different person. The breaking point came when I found a receipt in her gym bag for a restaurant across town. It was from a Tuesday evening, the same Tuesday she'd told me she was staying late at the gym for a new class. The receipt was for 2 meals, 2 drinks, and it was dated at 7:30 p.m. When I asked her about it, she got defensive and said she'd grabbed dinner after her workout with a friend from the gym. But when I asked which friend, she got flustered and said it was someone new, someone I wouldn't know. That's when I decided to get the camera. I felt disgusting doing it, like I was violating her privacy and our trust, but I needed to know what was really happening. I couldn't keep living in this state of constant anxiety and suspicion. I ordered a small wireless camera online, the kind that connects to your phone and records everything. It was tiny, about the size of a quarter, and it came with a magnetic mount. I waited until she left for work one morning, then went out to her car and attached it under the passenger seat. My hands were shaking the entire time. Part of me hoped I wouldn't find anything, that maybe I really was just being paranoid and she really was just going to the gym. But deep down, I knew I was about to discover something that would change everything. The first day, the camera just showed her driving to the gym and back. She really did go to the gym, stayed for about an hour, then came straight home. I felt a tiny bit of relief, but also more confused. Maybe I really was overthinking everything. But the second day changed everything. I was at work when my phone buzzed with a notification from the camera app. The motion sensor had been triggered. I opened the app expecting to see her getting into the car to drive home. But instead, I watched her car pull into a parking lot I didn't recognize. She sat there for maybe 5 minutes, checking her phone, before another car pulled up next to hers. My heart stopped when I saw who got out of that other car and climbed into the passenger seat of my wife's car. It was my sister. My younger sister who lived about 20 minutes away and who I hadn't seen in weeks because she'd been so busy with work and her own life. At first, I thought maybe it was some kind of coincidence. Maybe they'd run into each other somewhere and my sister needed a ride or something. But then I watched them lean toward each other, and I saw my wife's hand reach up to touch my sister's face in a way that was definitely not sisterly. And then they kissed. Not a quick peck on the cheek or even a friendly kiss on the lips. They kissed like lovers. Deep, passionate, intimate. My sister's hand was in my wife's hair, and they stayed like that for what felt like forever, but was probably only about 30 seconds. When they broke apart, they were both smiling in a way I hadn't seen my wife smile in months. I couldn't breathe. I was sitting in my office staring at my phone screen, watching my wife and my sister acting like a couple. They talked for a while, their heads close together, occasionally touching hands or arms. At one point, my sister laughed at something my wife said and leaned over to kiss her cheek. It was so casual, so natural, like they'd done it 1,000 times before. After about an hour, my sister got out of the car and back into her own car. Before she left, she leaned down to the driver's side window and they kissed again. Then they both drove away in different directions. I sat there in my office for the rest of the day, unable to focus on anything. I kept replaying what I'd seen, trying to make sense of it. How long had this been going on? How had I not noticed anything between them at family gatherings? When was the last time I'd even seen them interact? I realized it had been months since we'd all been in the same room together. When my wife came home that evening, she was in the best mood she'd been in weeks. She was humming in the shower, actually made conversation at dinner, and even suggested we watch a movie together. I couldn't enjoy any of it because all I could think about was what I'd witnessed earlier. Every time she smiled or laughed, I wondered if she was thinking about my sister. The next few days were torture. I watched more footage from the camera, and it became clear this wasn't a one-time thing. They met up almost every day, sometimes in that same parking lot, sometimes at different locations. Always in her car, always with the same intimate behavior. I saw them holding hands, kissing, talking intensely about things I couldn't hear. In one clip, I watched my sister wipe tears from my wife's eyes, then pull her into a long embrace. I started noticing things at home that I'd missed before. My wife had been getting texts throughout the day that she'd quickly delete after reading. She'd gotten her hair done recently, and when I complimented it, she'd blushed and said it was nothing special, but now I wondered if she'd done it for my sister. There were new clothes in her closet, nicer underwear in her drawer, a new perfume on her dresser that she'd never worn around me. Update 1. I couldn't take it anymore. After a week of watching footage of my wife and sister together, I had to confront them. But I couldn't figure out how to do it without revealing that I'd been spying on them. I felt guilty about the camera, but I also felt justified because of what I'd discovered. I decided to confront my wife first. I waited until a Friday evening when I knew they'd met up earlier that day. She came home in that same good mood she'd been in lately, and I just couldn't pretend anymore. I told her I knew she wasn't really going to the gym every day. I said I knew she was meeting someone and that I knew it wasn't just a friend. I didn't mention the camera or that I knew it was my sister. I wanted to see what she would say, if she would lie to my face or come clean. Her face went completely white. She sat down on the couch and put her head in her hands. For a long time, she didn't say anything. Then she started crying, but they weren't the kind of tears you cry when you're sorry. They seemed more like tears of relief, like she was exhausted from keeping a secret. She told me she'd been meaning to talk to me for weeks, but didn't know how. She said she'd never planned for this to happen and that she was confused and scared about what it meant. But she didn't tell me who it was. She kept referring to this person as someone she'd met recently, someone who understood her in a way she'd never experienced before. I asked her directly if she was having an affair, and she said it wasn't that simple. She said it wasn't about not loving me or wanting to hurt me, but that she'd discovered something about herself that she couldn't ignore. She said she needed time to figure things out. I was getting frustrated because she still wasn't being completely honest. I told her I deserved to know who this person was, especially if she was considering ending our marriage over them. That's when she broke down completely and admitted it was my sister. The way she said it was so quiet I almost didn't hear her. She said my sister's name like it was a confession she'd been dying to make. Then she looked at me with this expression of terror and hope, like she was afraid of my reaction but also relieved to finally tell the truth. I didn't react the way I thought I would. I thought I'd yell or throw something or storm out. Instead, I just felt numb. I asked her how long it had been going on, and she said about 4 months. It had started when my sister had come over to help her with some project while I was out of town for work. They'd been talking and drinking wine, and my sister had made some comment about how she'd always thought my wife was beautiful. One thing led to another. She swore it was never physical at first, just emotional. They'd started texting all the time, then meeting up for coffee or lunch. She said my sister was going through a hard time with some personal stuff, and my wife had been trying to be supportive. But somewhere along the way, it became something more. I asked her if she was gay, and she said she didn't know. She said she'd never felt this way about a woman before, but that being with my sister felt more natural and right than anything she'd ever experienced. She said she loved me, but that she wasn't in love with me anymore. and that she'd probably been feeling that way for longer than she'd realized. The worst part was that she seemed happy talking about it. Once she started explaining her feelings, it was like she couldn't stop. She told me about how my sister made her laugh, how they could talk for hours about things they'd never been able to discuss with anyone else. She said my sister understood her dreams and ambitions in a way that made her feel seen and supported. I wanted to hate her, but mostly I just felt betrayed and confused. This was my wife of 6 years and my sister, two of the most important people in my life, and they'd been lying to me for months. I told her I needed some time to process everything and went to stay at a friend's house for the weekend. While I was there, I couldn't stop thinking about my sister's role in all of this. My wife was one thing, but my sister had grown up with me. She knew how much my wife meant to me. She'd been at our wedding, had helped us move into our house, had been part of our lives in so many ways. How could she do this to me? I decided I needed to talk to her too. Update 2. I called my sister and asked her to meet me for coffee. She agreed, but I could tell from her voice that she knew what this was about. When I saw her at the coffee shop, she looked like she hadn't been sleeping well. She seemed nervous and kept checking her phone, probably hoping my wife would text her some kind of guidance on how to handle this conversation. I didn't beat around the bush. I told her I knew about her and my wife, and I wanted to hear her side of the story. Her reaction was completely different from my wife's. Where my wife had seemed relieved to finally be honest, my sister seemed almost annoyed that she had to explain herself. She told me she was sorry I had to find out this way, but she wasn't sorry about what had happened. She said she'd been questioning her sexuality for years, but had never felt safe enough to explore it. When she and my wife had connected, it felt like the universe giving her permission to finally be honest about who she was. I asked her how she could do this to me, how she could pursue a relationship with my wife knowing it would destroy my marriage and our family relationships. She said she hadn't planned for it to happen, but that she couldn't ignore her feelings just to protect mine. She said it wasn't about me, it was about her finally being authentic to herself. That made me angry in a way I hadn't felt during my conversation with my wife. I told her that her authenticity came at the cost of my marriage and my trust, and that she should have considered the consequences before acting on her feelings. She said I was being selfish and that I couldn't expect people to deny who they were just to make me comfortable. We argued for almost an hour. She kept insisting that what she and my wife had was real and meaningful, and that they deserved to be happy together. I kept trying to make her understand that they'd built their happiness on lies and betrayal. She accused me of being homophobic, which hurt because I'd always considered myself supportive of the community. I tried to explain that this wasn't about their relationship being between two women. It was about the dishonesty and the fact that it was my wife and my sister. She eventually told me that they'd been talking about my wife leaving me so they could be together openly. She said my wife was scared to hurt me, but that they both knew this was what they wanted. My sister said she hoped I could eventually understand and maybe even be happy for them, but that they weren't going to hide anymore regardless of how I felt. When I got home, my wife was waiting for me. She'd clearly been talking to my sister and knew about our conversation. She apologized for how everything had happened, but she also confirmed what my sister had said about wanting to end our marriage. She said she'd been trying to figure out how to tell me for weeks, and that she knew there was no way to do it that wouldn't hurt me. She said she loved me as a person and would always care about me, but that she couldn't keep pretending to be someone she wasn't. Over the next few weeks, we had a lot of difficult conversations about how to handle the divorce. She wanted to try to keep it amicable, and honestly, so did I. Despite everything, I didn't want to make the process more painful than it had to be. We'd built a life together, and I didn't want to destroy all of it out of spite. The hardest part was telling our families and friends. My wife wanted to be honest about why we were getting divorced, but I asked her to wait until the divorce was final before going public with her relationship with my sister. I needed time to figure out how to handle the family dynamics, and didn't want to deal with everyone's reactions while we were still sorting out the legal stuff. But my sister apparently couldn't wait. About a month after our conversation, she posted a photo on social media of her and my wife holding hands with some caption about being true to yourself and finding love in unexpected places. She tagged my wife and used a bunch of hashtags about love and authenticity. I found out because mutual friends started texting me asking what was going on. My parents called me confused and upset. My wife's family started reaching out wanting to know if we were okay. It was humiliating having to explain the situation over and over again. especially when people would give me these pitying looks like I was some tragic figure who'd been blindsided by circumstances beyond my control. Update 3. The social media post changed everything. What had been a private family crisis suddenly became public drama that everyone felt entitled to have opinions about. My sister's friends were commenting about how brave she was for living her truth. My wife's coworkers apparently knew the whole story because she'd confided in some of them months ago. I felt like everyone had known what was happening except me. My parents were devastated. My mom called me crying, saying she didn't understand how my sister could do this to our family. My dad was angry and wanted to cut my sister off completely. They kept apologizing to me like they were somehow responsible for my sister's choices, which made me feel even worse. My wife's parents had a different reaction. They'd apparently known something was going on because my wife had been asking them hypothetical questions about sexuality and marriage for months. They weren't thrilled about the divorce, but they seemed more accepting of her relationship with my sister than my own parents were. The divide in our families made everything more complicated. Holiday plans were ruined because no one knew how to handle having my wife and sister together at family events. My parents didn't want my sister there, but my other siblings thought cutting her off was too extreme. My wife's family wanted to be supportive of her new relationship, but they also felt awkward about the situation with me. I started seeing a counselor to help me process everything, which actually helped more than I expected. She helped me realize that my anger toward my sister was different from my hurt about my wife. With my wife, I was grieving the end of our marriage, but also recognizing that she deserved to be happy and authentic, even if it meant we couldn't be together. With my sister, I was dealing with a fundamental betrayal of trust that felt more personal and intentional. The counselor also helped me understand that my sister's sexuality wasn't the problem. It was her willingness to pursue a relationship with my wife without considering the impact on me or our family. She could have explored her identity in ways that didn't involve destroying my marriage. About 6 months after everything came out, my wife and I finalized our divorce. It was actually less dramatic than I'd expected. We split our assets fairly, neither of us fought over stupid stuff, and we managed to stay civil throughout the process. She kept the house because she could afford the mortgage on her own, and I moved into an apartment closer to downtown. My sister and wife moved in together almost immediately after the divorce was final. Seeing them together in public was still weird, but it was getting easier. They seemed genuinely happy, which made it harder to stay angry even though I sometimes wanted to. The turning point came at my cousin's wedding about 8 months after everything happened. My whole family was there, including my sister and my ex-wife. I'd been dreading it for weeks, but my cousin had made it clear that everyone was invited and she didn't want family drama at her wedding. I ended up sitting at the same table as them during dinner, which was incredibly awkward at first. But as the evening went on and we all had a few drinks, we actually started talking normally for the first time since everything had happened. My ex-wife asked about my new apartment and my job. My sister told me about a trip they were planning. It wasn't like old times, but it wasn't hostile either. At one point, my sister pulled me aside and apologized. Not for her relationship with my ex-wife, but for how she'd handled everything with me. She said she'd been so focused on her own feelings and her own journey that she hadn't really considered how her choices would affect me. She said she knew she couldn't undo the hurt she'd caused, but that she hoped we could eventually have some kind of relationship again because I was still her brother and she missed me. It wasn't a perfect apology and it didn't fix everything, but it felt like a start. Final update. It's been almost 2 years now since everything happened. My ex-wife and sister are engaged, which I found out through social media like everyone else. Part of me is happy for them because they do seem genuinely in love, but part of me still feels weird about the whole situation. I've been dating someone new for about 6 months now. She knows the whole story and has been incredibly patient with my trust issues and my complicated family situation. She's helped me realize that what happened with my ex-wife and sister, while painful, actually freed me to find someone who's a better match for me. My relationship with my sister is still complicated, but we're working on it. We text occasionally and see each other at family events. It's not the same as it was before, and honestly, it probably never will be. But we're both trying to move forward in a way that doesn't require the rest of our family to choose sides. My parents have slowly come around to accepting the situation. They're not thrilled, but they've realized that cutting my sister off completely would just create more family drama. My mom still gets weird when my sister and ex-wife are at the same events, but she's learning to be civil. The whole experience taught me a lot about myself and about relationships. I learned that you can't control other people's choices, even when those choices directly impact your life. I learned that forgiveness doesn't mean pretending something didn't hurt or that it was okay. It means deciding not to let that hurt control your future. I also learned that sometimes the people closest to you are capable of betraying you in ways you never imagined. But that doesn't mean you have to let that betrayal define how you see all relationships going forward. My ex-wife and I occasionally run into each other around town, and we're friendly when we do. She seems happier than she was during the last year of our marriage, which makes me think she was probably struggling with her identity longer than either of us realized. I'm not glad our marriage ended, but I'm glad she found a way to be authentic to herself. My sister and I will probably never be as close as we were before, but I've accepted that. She made choices that prioritized her happiness over our relationship, and while I understand why she did it, I don't have to pretend it didn't hurt or that I'm completely over it. The camera is long gone. I threw it away after the first week because I felt gross about having used it. But I don't regret getting it because it gave me the truth I needed to make informed decisions about my life. I just wish the truth had been different. People sometimes ask me if I saw it coming, and honestly, I didn't. My wife's distance and behavior changes made sense in hindsight, but I never would have guessed she was questioning her sexuality or that she was involved with my sister. I think they both surprised themselves with how they felt about each other. Looking back, I think my marriage probably would have ended eventually anyway. My ex-wife needed to figure out who she was, and I deserved to be with someone who was certain about wanting to be with me. The relationship with my sister just accelerated a process that was probably inevitable. I'm in a better place now than I was 2 years ago. I have a job I like, an apartment I love, a girlfriend who makes me laugh, and a family that's slowly healing from all the drama. My ex-wife and sister get to be happy together. My parents are learning to accept the situation, and I'm building a life that's authentically mine. It's not the life I planned, but it's a good life. And sometimes that's enough.